But as I've written in this book, If You Love This Planet, there's a man called James Hansen who is the godfather of global warming. He's at NASA. And he said one of the most important things to do right now is to stop burning coal, because it's the most concentrated form of carbon. Of course, it comes from trees, ancient trees. And yet our Prime Minister has produced a climate change bill, so-called, which really does nothing, except it compensates the coal companies, in fact funds them to the tune of millions of dollars in compensation, and he's funding or helping to support the uranium industry too. He's going along to Copenhagen, where I'm actually going to go too, with a notion to reduce CO2 production in this country by 5% by 2020. It should be, some people are saying that the developed countries should reduce it by 80% by 2020 because things are so profoundly urgent. So he and Penny Wong have produced a bill which is absolutely useless, but he will parade around, I'm sure, in Copenhagen as if he's God's gift to the world. And I actually, in retrospect, would have preferred Howard, because at least you knew what he was doing. He was a wolf in wolf's clothing, whereas this one's a wolf in sheep's clothing. I actually need my handbag, please. Sorry, it's got my handkerchief in it. Okay, so look, without further ado, you're here to hear about nuclear power. Oh, can I walk around with this?
Yes.
How?
I'll have to disconnect the... oh, sorry.
Thanks.
I'll fix that up for you.
Okay, I'm as a paediatrician and children's doctor, the main problem about nuclear power is it's extraordinarily medically dangerous, not just for this generation, but all future generations, and that we have an enormous responsibility. What?
I'll pop this one. That's for the video.
Oh, the video. Just put it, you can put it there. To preserve the Earth, not just from global warming, but nuclear power, and it's not appropriate to jump from the global warming frying pan into the nuclear fire, which is what is being advocated by our politicians. Incidentally, you do have a letter that you can sign to Martin Ferguson. He's in the electorate of Batman, and I would strongly suggest that all of us become volunteers and door knock on all the doors in Batman to make sure Martin Ferguson doesn't get re-elected. He's one of the more dangerous people we have in the Parliament at the moment. I can tell you why later. But he's big into nuclear power. He's mooting the prospect of Australia becoming the nuclear waste dump of not just Australia but the world. He's doing it all in secret, and he's extraordinarily ignorant when it comes to biology or science. So I'm going to walk you through quickly the nuclear fuel cycle. You know, uranium is the raw material for nuclear power and weapons. We've got 40% of the world's richest uranium, particularly at Olympic Dam in South Australia, and there's a place in Western Australia which BHP is about to mine, called Yeelirrie, with a lot of uranium as well. I'm going to the BHP board meeting in a couple of weeks because I've got some shares and I can stand up and try and educate them. Uranium has two isotopes, basically 235 and 238. This is present in 0.7%, and that's the only fissionable isotope. This one doesn't fission. If it's enriched to 3%, it's for use in nuclear power plants. If it's enriched above 50%, you can make bombs with it. And that's why they're worried about Iran building uranium enrichment plants, because they're worried she may go on. Once you can enrich uranium, you can make bombs or nuclear power. Under the terms of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, Iran is perfectly entitled to have all technology to create nuclear power, including enrichment plants. so that any country that has nuclear technology has access to bombs. As we export our uranium, we're actually exporting nuclear weapons and many diseases, which I'll describe in a minute. Now, uranium decays through a series of daughter products, one of which is radon gas, which causes lung cancer in people who inhale it. And in the past, 30 to 50% of men who've mined uranium have died of lung cancer because of radon. It gets inhaled into the terminal air passages, irradiating a tiny volume of cells. But those cells get a high dose. Many die, but some remain viable to later become cancerous. Radium is also one of the daughters. Radium was enriched and isolated by Madame Curie, and she was so fascinated she'd walk around with a little piece of it in her lab coat pocket. She died of leukemia induced by radium because it's a bone seeker like calcium, and it's deposited in bones where it irradiates the blood-forming cells in the bone marrow. Her daughter also died of leukemia because she also worked with radium. There are many other daughters. They're called daughters of uranium decay. I won't go into all of them, but many of them give off gamma radiation too, which is like X-rays. So men that mine uranium are subjected to ingesting, swallowing radium, and that usually the mines are very dusty, they're in the desert, inhaling radon gas to cause lung cancer. This causes bone cancer or leukemia, and their whole body is irradiated by low dose but external radiation, and that means their testicles are also irradiated, the most important organs in the male body in terms of reproduction and future generations. So it's a dangerous process, and it's very difficult, if not impossible, for doctors to talk to the unions now or the men before they mine uranium. I did it once at Mary Kathleen, and many of them left, and their wives dragged them away when they heard about the dangers. This one here is called depleted uranium. It's only depleted of 235, not of radiation. It has a half-life of 4.5 billion years, which means you multiply a half-life by 20 to get its total decay time. And they're using uranium-238 for weapons in Iran, anti-tank weapons, as it's almost twice as dense as lead, and it gives it a tremendous momentum. When the weapon made of uranium-238 hits the tank, because they're anti-tank weapons, in fact, up to 80% of it burns, producing tiny little particles that can be inhaled into the terminal air passage of the lung. In Basra, where they used 360 tons of this ammunition in 1991, when George I invaded Iraq, there's been a 700% increase in childhood cancer, and children are very sensitive to radiation because you can see them actively growing. And a 700% increase in severe congenital anomalies, babies born with no brains, single eyes, no arms. Now, I've just read an article in The Guardian yesterday, and in Fallujah, where there was a hell of a bombing, that I think about 250,000 people evacuated, but they bombed the hell out of that city. They're seeing a similar increase in childhood cancer and severe congenital anomalies, actually 12 times normal, according to The Guardian. They hardly ever saw congenital anomalies. And the problem with this is that because of its extremely long half-life, we're talking about polluting the cradle of civilization for the rest of time. And this is beyond a war crime. This is absolute wickedness. And you may be sure some of the uranium in these weapons comes from Australian uranium. It's good because uranium-238 is a waste product, and it's free, and it's freely available for the Pentagon to turn into weapons. When they went in this time, instead of using 360 tonnes, they've used over 1,000 tonnes, but the Pentagon is very closed-mouthed about it, and we don't exactly know how much, but what we're seeing is the problem of the medical problem related to uranium-238.